So in case you don't know who I am, I thought I'd give a little introduction. My business model is pretty unusual in that I chase really interesting stories that I know reality capture can make even more interesting or can breathe new life into. So I'll go anywhere, I'll try anything. And when the Alcatraz project came up, I was all in. Who would say no, right? And nobody did. So the genesis of the project, Alcatraz is operated and maintained by the National Park Service in the US. And it's an incredibly popular tourist attraction, something like 5 to 10,000 visitors every day. Well, if you're in charge of managing this place and it's an island, sea level rise was, if you will, the gateway drug that let me get in there and do all the interesting things that the team did. So when they said, well, our number one concern is sea level rise, I asked, well, tell me about your digital assets. And like many clients, they said, digital what, right? They didn't know. I had to explain to them what that meant. So many people had scanned on Alcatraz before, but nobody had done the whole place inside and out before. So I said, I want to do it all. And they said, okay. So then the challenges began. Essentially, how in the world am I going to pull this off and survive? And it was actually a pretty easy answer to that question. It was, I'm going to call everybody I know and ask for every favor possible. And we'll talk about that as we get into it. But first, Alcatraz actually has a long history that extends far beyond the prison that's so famous. Like, this is the earliest known photograph of the island in 1860. Now, American history-wise, that is, 1853. The gold rush in the US is spinning out of control. So all the gold from California is leaving through the port of San Francisco. So a few years later, they created a fortress to basically guard the entrance to this very strategic harbor. So the first infrastructure on Alcatraz was actually military. And what's cool about that, when I get to the data, I'll get to show you some of that. Because what's so great about reality capture is we can peel away layers of history and show everyone things that no one has seen, no one living has seen before. So this building on top of the island, it's called the Citadel. You're going to see the foundation of that the cellhouse was built on top of. But we got to get down in there and scan it all. That's the Citadel there in red. You can see this was a fortress. It's just surrounded by guns in every direction to defend this very strategic harbor. Okay? Along about 1910, Alcatraz evolves from a fortress into a military prison and then a federal penitentiary, which it's famous for. So it was basically under construction for about 3 years. When it was finished, in the US, the worst of the worst were put there. So if top left, that's Al Capone. He did time on Alcatraz. Next to him, the Birdman of Alcatraz. Top right, I love this photo. That's Machine Gun Kelly, who somehow was allowed to wear a fedora for his mugshot. Completely nuts. Under him, that's Doc Barker. And then this guy, that's Whitey Bulger, who actually did time in the late 50s, early 60s. I'm going to show you some data specific to an event. It's known as the Battle of Alcatraz. That happened, there was a prison riot in 1946 where the prisoners actually took over the cell house by force, killed a bunch of guards. It was not good, a lot of violence, but the US government actually called in the Marines and they started mortaring and hand grenades and everything to put down this riot, and I'll show you some of the evidence of that we picked up in the scans. Just about everybody, because so many movies have been made on Alcatraz, knows the story of these guys. These are the only 3 guys known to have escaped, to have got off the island. And I'm going to show you how they did it in the data. So now, I'm going to talk about the many challenges for this project. So the first one, as a project manager, I became aware of is that Alcatraz is an island, and the only way out there is on a ferry, okay? Well, the first ferry is at 8:30 in the morning, and the last ferry off is at about 4, and right away I knew that I was given 3 weeks to do this, and right away I knew that in 3 weeks, it's a short enough time window. There's no way I can depend on the ferry schedule to make this work. So I asked, would it be okay if we stayed on the island? And they said yes. So the team and I spent 3 weeks in cells on Alcatraz. And it was as cool as it sounds. It was great. It was so much fun. So obviously, we worked hard. It was a lot of work, but there was sort of an adventure side of this project that was just fabulous, okay? My cell for 3 weeks. I was in D block, 3rd tier, cell number 31, home sweet home. I think I was probably the last person. I had no idea that Alcatraz is haunted. Ghosts everywhere. I had no idea. I get asked a lot, did I have any kind of experiences living in this cell for 3 weeks? I slept great. I didn't. But one of my guys had a terrible experience, and if you see me in the bar, I'll tell you the story. It's pretty crazy. But to have Alcatraz to ourselves, I mean, there were 5 or 6 of us for 3 weeks, and at 4:30, everybody's gone. It's just us and 1 security guard, which was incredible. I mean, how it looks at night, how quiet the cell house gets, you know, every little noise is, you know, that kind of thing. Great fun, quite an adventure. And the view, because I was always up first. I'd always be up early, and, you know, I'd come outside and see the city of San Francisco, you know, a view that no one's seen before. Remember that, because you're going to see that in some data in a minute. So, like all strategic projects like this, I wanted to do it all. I wanted to do SLAM LiDAR, terrestrial laser scanning, drone-based LiDAR, drone-based photogrammetry. We even threw in multispectral. Sorry. The first thing we had to do was establish a survey control network so we could merge all this data together into one cohesive data set. My background is all civil survey geospatial, so I insisted that this had to be the first thing we did. And my buddy John, that's PCL Construction, he set up the survey control network. We had like 60 GCPs, ground control points. The math across the whole island worked out to about 6 millimeters. It was great, amazing. So we had a really high level of precision once we started to assemble all the data. We flew a lot of drones. Again, at the time, and this was almost 2 years ago, there really wasn't one sensor that could do it all, inside and out. Because we did, if I haven't already said that, I was on the hook to scan everything, inside and out, every tunnel, every space, everything we could access. Well, what are we going to use? What's the tool set going to look like? Well, it started with a lot of drones for the airborne component, so we used an inspired flight. It's a 1200i, US-made drone with a Phoenix LiDAR Ranger 120 for the drone-based LiDAR. Spectacular. We flew the FreeFly Astro, another US drone. We flew it indoors, and I'll show you a video of that with a hover map. Just because we could get all those points of view that we couldn't get from the ground or one of the tiers. We flew the EB. The EB we used for some photogrammetry and then all of the multispectral. The Helios 3, lower left. I had heard of this thing, but I had never used it before, and wow, was I impressed, right? Flies in a cage, so you can bump into things and it won't crash. LiDAR, 4K video, and its own light source. So we sent that thing into some horrible, horrible places. Sewers, down in the dungeon, down in the Citadel, cisterns. We sent it up the smokestack. I mean, places we couldn't send any other sensor just due to access. So, pretty amazing collection of gear. That's the drone-based LiDAR from Phoenix. We conducted all the air operations from the cellhouse roof. If you know San Francisco, you see how perfect the weather is? That was a miracle. It was a miracle. Because I had a really short window where they would let us fly because Alcatraz doesn't close. The tourists are there the whole time. So I'm going, oh God, the weather has to be right, the weather has to be right, the weather has to be. It was perfect. We got extraordinarily lucky. This is the team from Esri with an Astro Max, a Sony A7R4 camera who flew the photogrammetry for us. And I'll show you that data. It's great. You'll see it in just a moment. The Helios 3. This is down in the Citadel, down in the dungeon. And this is a 170-year-old sewer line that nobody had been in since 1978. So we sent this thing down in there. We didn't get as far as I would have liked just because the dust and 170 years of stuff was getting kicked up, but the data was amazing. So one of the great opportunities for me, because I've been in the tech space for years and years, is to be exposed to the E3. It's a really interesting piece of gear. If we have the cell house to ourselves, we're going to fly indoors. I didn't even ask. Like, we're just going to do it. Because there's nobody here to tell us no. So we flew the hover map inside. Spot. Spot was an amazing tool because there were locations in certain buildings on Alcatraz that had contamination problems specific to lead and asbestos where we couldn't fly because the rotor wash would have kicked up all that stuff. Spot was perfect. Hover map on Spot, we're getting LiDAR data as we move. It was a great solution to that particular problem. Next surprise. So originally, I had not planned to have any TLS, terrestrial laser scanning, done on the island, just because at the time, 3 weeks wasn't enough time to pull that off, okay? The guys from Phoenix LiDAR called me up and said, hey, you know, the guys with Regal have heard about this project and they'd really like to come. Is that okay? And I said, well, sure, but please come. But I'm not sure I've got any work for them. So anyway, Tan and Brian showed up with 2 scanners that blew my mind. The first one is Tan told me, oh yeah, see this scanner here? This can see over 2.5 kilometers. And in my head, I was like, show me. And he showed me. That scanner picked up downtown San Francisco from the cellhouse roof. I was totally impressed. And then the other scanner, the 600i, it's one of the sound bites that'll be forever in my head. We're in the cellhouse, there's nobody there, the visitors are gone, and I hear this shuffle, 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 beep, shuffle, 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 beep. The 600i was doing 30-second scans in the cellhouse. And I didn't believe it. I was like, what 30 seconds? Anyway, 2 more pieces of reality capture gear that just blew my mind. I wasn't even aware existed at the time. Okay. There were a series of actual miracles that happened that enabled this project to be a success. First and foremost, the team. So I may be up here telling this story, but these are the folks who made it happen. And if any of you, any of the team are in the audience or work for one of these vendors, would you please stand up? Please. Tan, my friend, Stefan, Jeremy. There he is. So these are the folks who made it happen. I'm eternally grateful, okay? And we had fun. We had fun doing it. So there's a list of, it's quite a list of hardware, right? Again, at the time, I knew that this was going to take a Frankenstein-esque combination of gear that no one had really tried before. And one of my favorite parts of this whole project is that you might see some vendors up here who compete for the same market share, right? We all got along. We all cooperated. There were moments where somebody would be stuck working in the office and you'd think it might be, oh, I can't show them that. They're a competitor. It was just the opposite. It was, I think I have an idea or I have a solution. Check this out. Let me show you how this works. It was extraordinary. So again, my favorite part of this project was the collaboration that occurred, the innovation that occurred, how we just collectively figured this thing out in real time, okay? On the software side, post-processing, a lot of different pieces of gear, okay? And learned a lot about software, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the second miracle, I was dying a bit of a slow death in the office because nobody told me that the Wi-Fi on Alcatraz is terrible. So the cloud was out. And that surprised me. And I'm guilty of that. I should have known that in advance in retrospect. But what are we going to do? The cloud is out. We have our laptops, but we're talking terabytes of data. This is never going to work. So I'm suffering. And my buddy John with PCL said, hey, I've got a friend at AMD. Let me put in a call and see if they can help us. And 24 hours later, this prototype workstation, it wasn't available commercially. It's a Threadripper Pro, 96 cores, half a terabyte of RAM, an incredible GPU, ton of hard drive space. It saved the project. Now what I learned about the software once we got this thing running, Well, the coolest thing was you go to the task manager and see 96 cores running. The nerd in me was like, you have to come see this. You have to like look at that. Never seen anything like it. The surprise was that not many of the apps on that list are written to take advantage of 96 cores. What are we going to do? We just stacked up additional sessions of the app until I saw the RAM was running out. Make sense? So we just ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. Another true story, the office on Alcatraz was really cold, but that machine kept us warm. I'm not kidding. It was great. So how about some data? This is the drone-based LiDAR that Phoenix LiDAR and the Inspired Flight 1200i did. I never get tired of looking at it. 5-return laser, amazing piece of gear. You know, used all of our 60 GCPs to get that survey grade accuracy. I just love it. Never gets old. How about some SLAM data? But merged interior and exterior. And this is what I love about what many of us do for a living. Specific to reality capture, we make the invisible visible. We give people perspectives and points of view that have never been seen before. This is such a great example of that, okay? But there's more. 1962 escape, okay? We may have spent a little extra time on this just because it was a movie and it was super cool. So scanned the whole escape route, which was well known in terms of how they did it, how they get out of their cells through these little holes, and then up onto the roof of the cells where they set up this workshop where they made rafts and life jackets and paddles and all this stuff, scanned it all. That's actually an FBI crime scene photo from 1963 of the exact same space where we were up scanning. And then the route looks like this. So that hole in the cell, right there. And then they climbed up these pipes every night for weeks until they got on the roof and got out of that hole up on top of the cell house, then down the cell house, and they were never heard from again. Scanned it all, and it so great to be able to have a perspective like this of actually how they did it. Remember I mentioned the Battle of Alcatraz, 1946, prison riot. The rioters actually got up into this gun gallery, and it's not open to visitors. That's me climbing up to try to get in there. The graffiti up there is epic. It's archaeology, literally. Now, all of what you see here are actually from the guards, because the guards are up there for hours and hours and bored and etc. The graffiti from the rioters, I can't show you because it's the most pornographic stuff I've ever seen. It's horrible. But we scanned all of that. How when the Marines arrived, they got up on the roof of the cell house, jackhammered holes in the roof, and then dropped bombs into that utility corridor, killed the last 3 guys, and the riot was over. But to be able to get in there, and then it turned into a bit of a forensic part of the project, if you will. It was fascinating to be able to be given access to all these off-limit places. Speaking of archaeology, in A block, which is the oldest part of the prison, this kind of graffiti is everywhere. So this goes back to when Alcatraz, this would have been 1910. And what was crazy for me is that's a family name. It's my Harris. It's a family name for me. So I've always wondered, you know, should I have asked my grandparents for a story they probably didn't want to tell me? But this is, you know, this is chilling, right? Because this was in solitary confinement. No windows, no light, total darkness. The Helios 3, I told you we sent it into some crazy places. This was a confined space that nobody in the Park Service even knew what was in there. Because even the most senior people who had worked there said, nobody's been down there. We don't know what's in there. So it turns out that it's Civil War, American Civil War era magazines for ammunition, gunpowder, fuses, all that kind of stuff for all those guns when it was a fort. This is a bit of the power station. 2 huge oil-fed boilers. You know, we sent the E3 up there into 120 years worth of dirt and dust, and, you know, it rained on us for a couple of flights. But it was an amazing tool for helping us fulfill our commitment that we're going to get every space we can. Multispectral, one of my favorite sensors. Just talk about making the invisible visible. So if you're not familiar with it, it's used in agriculture. It's basically red, green, blue, and then near infrared and red edge band cameras. You see this circle? You can't see that with a naked eye on the ground. And it turns out it was a helipad in the 1960s that they used to ferry people on and off the island. And nobody, the Park Service didn't know it was there. So that was one of those rare moments when we went, we found something. You know, we discovered something that people had forgotten about. It was really a really cool, happy accident. This is the photogrammetry from Esri. I will never forget when I saw this the first time and saw that chain link fence, because I've been doing this a long time ago. I mean, 10 years ago, that would have been considered witchcraft, right? But it worked. It was spectacular. So, thanks, Jeremiah. So, well, the data types are piling up now, right? We have SLAM, TLS, drone-based LiDAR, drone-based photogrammetry. It keeps getting interesting. When we start combining it all, you get to see things no one has seen before. It's my favorite part about being in the reality capture space is this. In all the television work we do, or I do, this is called the reveal. My favorite part. Just love it. Where you get to see, wow, how did they build this? What about the layers of history from the Civil War era to the military prison to the modern prison to today? You know, how did all that work? How did they put all that together? It's another great look, combining drone with SLAMs and a bit of TLS. This is a modern building with a gabled roof, about 100 years old, that is right up next to the original gate going up the hill to the military prison. Well, in the data, of course, we can remove the modern to see the gate in a way that no one has seen before. And you see the name of the island, Alcatraz Island, 1857. Now, I'll tell you, if you go to Alcatraz and you walk up the hill and you go through the gate, look up and you'll see that sign, because there is a gap, okay? But 10,000 people a day walk right through that gate and have no idea that that's above their heads. I had not used cesium before from Bentley. They asked me, hey, you know, what you're doing on Alcatraz is a great fit for our tool. Would you mind if we put something together and showed it to you? They did this in 24 hours. Couldn't believe it. So I'm now a bit of a cesium fan as well, because what an interesting way to tee up all of this data. This is the stuff nobody's seen before. When you combine everything. That's a tunnel connecting two buildings. Civil War era magazine right here. That's the morgue. Okay? Another magazine over here, and it's right under the yard, the exercise yard at Alcatraz. I thought that was great. Another similar view, but, well, what about adding color? Like I said, I mean, I'm biased, but I could watch this all day long. So there's that magazine. Off limits to tourists, of course. The morgue. All Civil War era stuff. Cool stuff. Another look from the other end of the island. Well, what about the cellhouse? This is a product called Nubagon you might be familiar with. An amazing way for visualizing point clouds. Colorize one, don't colorize the other. They have a function called X-ray, which makes it, you can look through parts of a building to see other parts behind it. Big fan of this, another discovery through the project for me. It's a little hard to see, but that's the citadel under the cell house there. It was really fun to see. For me, when all of this got put together, I knew that I was the first person ever to see this. And there's something kind of great about that, right? And you're actually the first people that I've shown this to publicly, these last couple of videos. Epic Games. Oh. So this is reality scan, the Unreal Engine, and twin motion. Because they were like, send us all the data, we can do some really great stuff with it. So they did this. Now, if you recognize that, that's now on the splash screen when you install Epic Games Reality Scan. It was so cool. It was just, what a great tip of the hat from Epic to all of us on the team who pulled this off. Unreal Engine, twin motion, all of the data rendered by Epic Games. So just sort of a taste of things to come. Okay? So I've been talking about how much fun we had. It was great. We had a blast. We learned things. I watched hardware and software products evolve based on the things we did here. And then happiest, I think, for me and for the team, a big sigh of relief for me was the story went global. The coverage has been exceeded my expectations. So for everybody on the team, I hope all this meant as much to you as it does to me. So with that, thank you very much.